should you use your calendar as a to-do list? So let's define the problem. You have two ways that you can determine what you need to do in a day. So the typical writing a list of items that you need to do, and you tick them off one by one. There's no timestamp attached to them. You might have due dates for them, but they're not in your calendar. And you keep your calendar separate only for bookings and events that take a specific duration of time and social events and that kind of thing. Is that fair to say? I've got to make sure I state my opponent's argument correctly.
So you're trying to summarize like how I view a calendar?
I'm trying to blue team it, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so
you're in blue today.
I'm in blue. I think you start from the point of things in the digital landscape, things of a certain type have a place, right? So in your digital information management system, lots of stuff gets thrown at you, and you think, right, well, I've got to deal with this some way, somehow. So I need to put it somewhere. So it makes sense for items with certain behavior, I'm looking for attributes, go certain places. So if something's going to happen at a certain time, that goes in your calendar. So meet somebody, for example, go to a certain location, being somewhere for a certain period of time, or a call or a meeting, that would go on a calendar. Things that like you can do at any time would go in a to-do list. Things with a reminder that you need to remember on a certain date could go in a calendar, or they probably go in a to-do list system. And reference material would go somewhere else. Notes would go somewhere else. Photos, files, passwords, all these sorts of things. You have like apps, software, tools to handle things that you would use on a daily basis. I think Yusef's view is like you keep your to-do items on a calendar, which I don't think is what you mean. Let's just clarify that. You don't just keep all of the things that you would ever have to do on your calendar.
Not all of them, no. I mean, in fairness, I'm not a calendar purist. There are some people who are total calendar purists. I think the guy from Mind Valley is.
Everything's on his calendar.
Yeah, literally. But I'm kind of a hybrid.
Okay.
Calendar to do athlete, but I'm going to take the position of calendar for the sake of this debate.
Okay. So, but you use TickTick, right?
Yeah.
As well. So, what would go in TickTick?
So, anything that is a task or an event.
Or an event.
Yeah.
So if you and I were, let's say tomorrow, I was like, let's go for lunch tomorrow. Let's go for a 5-hour, 5-course tasting menu.
So I would press Command Shift O, and then I would say Command 6 social, which puts it into the social list, and I would say lunch with Jonny.
Of what? The social list of what?
In TickTick.
Okay, so you're putting an appointment tomorrow into TickTick.
Yeah, and then that would appear on my calendar as like a 1-hour appointment, lunch with Jonny, and then when that lunch is finished, I would tick it off.
You would tick it off. Yeah.
I mean, hear the nausea from Jonny.
It's a way of doing it. So how about this then? What about you need to fill out a form by a certain date? Where would that go?
I think TickTick's actually just introduced due dates as well as dates. I don't know what you call it, like action dates and due dates.
So like when you would work on something or when it's due.
Yeah, but I tend to only use one date system. So I would just put it as to when I'm going to fill out the form rather than the deadline.
So I think we've got there.
Okay.
I think this is the fundamental difference in the two ways. So the way that I view it is there's like a hard landscape. And a lot of this, by the way, is learned from David Allen and various other people. Like I haven't come up with this. So like, there's a hard landscape. So there's things that are definitely going to happen in a day or in a week or in a month. That like whether it's, unless I like bail on stuff or don't sort of like maintain my basic responsibilities, like I'll be on those calls, I'll be on those occasions, I'll be at those events. And then there's time in between, there's white space in the calendar that could be filled by appointments and bookings and meetings and things like that, Or I would go into my task management system and think, okay, I'm going to work on something today.
Okay.
What am I going to work on?
So actually, this is probably where we're most similar, because I think you have calendar appointments for things like breakfast and sleep and lunch.
I do, but only so that nobody can book up a call with me through our
At that time,
booking
right.
system at that time. Yeah.
Okay.
Not because I need to I don't check my calendar to see when am I having lunch today.
Okay. Because I know that there's people like Sam Evans who will calendar out everything, but that's also because he wants to live such a routinized life that he always has breakfast at 8 and always has, trains at 9 and so on.
And for his team to see what he's doing.
Yeah. So then the crux of it, as you say, is that you've got gaps in between the essential human stuff, which you can't get rid of. So you have to just schedule it in because it's going to happen anyway. So eating, pooing, sleeping, training, all that stuff is just essential. Lots of time pooing for me. So then you have gaps in between the essentials. You would see that as open space. A hybrid person would maybe have it as the themed day. So it might be content or clients or admin. And actually that's not a task. That's a category of event. And then what you would do hypothetically is in that block of theme, you would then look at your list of tasks and you would drag things into that block. So TickTick allows you to see your calendar and your list side by side, and then you can drag particular items over and assign them a time box. A pure calendar person probably wouldn't do that part. They would just have they would allocate. They wouldn't have categories. They would just purely allocate the task to the time.
So I have some questions.
Okay.
So I think it's best to discuss this in terms of example situations. So let's take tomorrow for an example. So is your tomorrow calendared out presently?
Yeah. Let's have a look.
How detailed is it calendared out?
So 9 a.m. I've got blood test.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to ask a doctor friend of mine to do a blood test on me. And that's for an upcoming video on red light therapy. So it's going to be good. And then
Teaser. Hashtag teaser.
Yeah. Then we've got nothing until 11 a.m. I think, yeah. Do you know why? I meant to have a recurring thing for editing, but I've not ticked it off. Then I've got podiatry at 11 because I've got a Ming in tow that I need to get sorted.
Right.
And then I've got Instagram scheduling, Twitter thread writing, meeting, and then a webinar that I need to go to at 4. And then training.
So if that was my calendar, I think I would have the blood test, assuming that's been arranged, unless it's a reminder to do the blood test, in which case I would do it. It would be in my task management system. The webinar would be in my task management system, and the podiatry would be. Everything else would be an action in my to-do list that's I've designated I'm going to work on today, probably
At some point.
But it wouldn't have it would only have that date as probably a suggestion, or I would leave that in an anytime view, and I would come to today and say, right, I've done all the things that I have to do today. It's the recurring tasks. I've got an hour free. What am I going to do? Go to any time, pick on and some of this is from priorities for the year, priorities for the quarter, priorities for the month. What are the most important things I should be doing? I'll pick something from that and do that today.
Yeah. So you've kept it very fluid then, because then you've got, because you're still doing things in the day. It's not like you sit on standby mode between events. but
Yeah.
But it's you're having to make all these micro decisions to look at your goals and your vision and move the task into, whereas a task still takes a certain amount of time to do. So because I don't want to have to try and make this conceptual distinction between what's an event and what's a task, because to me they're the same. So any task is an event and any event is a task, which probably sucks the fun out of life, because go on holiday. Oh, that's a task in my calendar.
That's a
Or-
task.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think it's ultimately managing lists, isn't it, of information. Like there's lists of things to do.
Fundamentally, we've got a big list of things that we need to do and
What do you do with that list?
an amount of time that you can do it in.
So what do you do at the end of today? And this is, I think, really where I think your approach, in my mind, breaks down. And I have a case study example of this breaking down in real time that I witnessed. I just watched it happen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, don't you? You get to the end of today and or let's say you get to tomorrow, right? And you didn't do your Twitter scheduling and you didn't do the Instagram. What do you do with those events?
Command to shift it onto tomorrow, but then that often will overlap on whatever I've got planned for that day.
Yep.
So you either have
then what do
to not plan too
then what
far
do
in
you do?
advance or have some wiggle room in your day.
So not planning too far in advance, doing it on the day is basically what I do. It just doesn't go in the calendar. It stays in lists, projects and lists, so that I always know like what the next thing is. And I don't do like quarterly planning daily. I'll do quarterly planning once, monthly planning once, weekly review. And in the weekly review I'll go like, all right, for this quarter, these are the things that these are the projects that I was going to try and do this quarter. Are these up to date? What's the next things I should do? All right, I'll probably try and do those this week, but they'll stay where they are. So on Wednesday, I haven't got any calls today. Great, I'll do da-da-da. And it doesn't go on the calendar. It stays on my today view. On things are OmniFocus depending on which one I'm using at the time. But if I get to the end of the day and I haven't done them, I would either just I would just move them back into any time and do them the next time I can, or I would leave them on today and they would come on to tomorrow. But I wouldn't then schedule more things for tomorrow. But I suppose in your view, if you would, or the purist, the person who would schedule everything on their calendar, as soon as you fall behind the timeline, you're fucked, aren't you?
Very much. This is the thing where it's like, if you assume that the future version of you will have like there'll be no interruptions, you won't get derailed by anything, you won't at like 6 p.m. you won't get a call that from your bank trying to scam you that takes an hour, and then that pushes forward everything else. And that's why I get so annoyed when my routine's been knocked, and it's just because that time's been accounted for and now it's been shoved out of the way. So yes, in an ideal world, if you had 0 distractions and you had themed days, you could turn up and you could say, right, this white spot here, I'm going to look at my list of things that match that theme. So you could do that with lists on TickTick or things, for example. So admin, you can have an admin list and then an admin block. And you look at your admin stuff and you have it ranked ordered by priority, and then you just work through that. So the block is really just start working through the list with this title.
Or even, it doesn't even have to be blocks. I think some of it is you find what works for you. Definitely. I think it's my problems with the calendar view is I think there are like practical problems that you can create for yourself that wouldn't have existed with a different system. Because as you say, like ultimately you and I spend our days doing tasks. So, and like,
or events, depending on how you...
Or events, yeah. And I think there's 2 lenses to view it through, 3 lenses to view it through. One of them is like, how do you do the most tasks in a day? How do you ensure you're spending the time doing the most important tasks? And then how much stress do you experience from like maintaining and managing the system that you use to maintain the list of things that you do?
Well, how many decisions are involved in that as well? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, I think what you've highlighted to me there is that I don't think it's a criticism of using your calendar necessarily. I think it's a criticism of my bad habit of overscheduling and trying.
I don't think it's not a criticism at all, because you should find what works for you.
Punctuated by... So Dexter agrees. Yeah,
Becca's just burst into the room mid podcast, and now Dex is gone.
he was furious about that prospect of the calendar. Yeah, that if you, and it is one of the big downsides of using your calendar, because you've got this big set of white space, and so you think, oh well, I'll just put all the stuff in there because that's white space. And you end up leaving no gaps for anything taking slightly longer than expected, or an interruption or a new thing that comes on your plate that has to then take precedence. Suddenly, then you've got to move all the other stuff out the way and bump it down the road. There are software solutions that attempt to solve this. So Motion Calendar tries to do this, and it uses, a bit cliche, but they use AI to figure out like what are the best times to do certain things, and if you put something new in, it like shuffles everything else further down. It's not something that's usable yet. Like I've tried it and I wasn't a big fan. I think maybe in a couple of years it'll be something that might be quite good.
Do you not think though that at some point, like, so if I took your calendar away from you and just each morning gave you like, you've got to do these 4 things today, would you find that more stressful?
So you would provide me with 4 things.
Yeah. So let's say like your calendar still exists, but it's wiped apart from like you've got your podiatry appointment. You got to go to that. And then the rest of the time is like, you've just got to do these 4 things today. Would you find that, because it's functionally, it's the same, right? It's just in one of those situations, you've got it designated of like when you're going to do each thing and how long it's going to take.
Yeah. So
and then the other, you've just got the things to do.
I think what I find appealing about it is that when it's in the calendar, I don't have to make the decision of when I start and stop, because I can be like, okay, it's 12 o'clock, so it's time to do this, which is quite nice, because then you feel like you're just being conveyor belted through life. Some people might hear that and think that sounds really depressing, that you're just kind of being steamrolled along.
So I think on the flip side, what I find stressful about what puts me off, because I have tried it, that scheduling out things on putting my to-do list on a like time block day, is you've got to then think, well, all right, I'm going to write 3 marketing emails. How long is that going to take? And then like, oh fuck, like what if I get interrupted?
It's 10 pancakes, isn't it?
Yeah, I should add like a buffer window in. And like, what if I'm wrong? Like, I think it's going to take an hour and a half. What if it takes 2 hours? Then I'll have to move that thing and then move that thing. And then do I stop work later, or do I move this final thing? Or whereas if I just have the 4 things on a list, like I'll either do the 4 things or I won't. Like the process of me doing it I don't think for me anyway, having it on a calendar is not going to make me like work faster or more efficiently, or it's just adding this like storyline to my day that makes me feel like I'm behind all the time.
Yeah, and that is a big one. And I think we both fall in for the idea that we can do more in a day than we actually can.
Definitely.
I mean, this is really the wrong time to say this, because we're right at the end of the podcast now. But if you've made it this far, the stuff this thing that we're debating here is the absolute. It's like, do you use Zhangong plates or Eleiko plates? Like, and the programming's the same, and you're still lifting 4 times a week and all this other stuff. Like, this is not going to make or break your productivity system.
No.
The essentials will always be that. We're just assuming here that you've got those in place, and now it's just like, okay, cherry on top, which app do you use, or how do you visualize those tasks that you're doing on a screen?
Yeah. And there's drawbacks to both of them, right? Like I'm perhaps if I could get over the stress that it adds, if I minute by minute schedule my day, I'd maybe make more use of the time. Like maybe being held a little bit accountable by a calendar and by a schedule in the day would help me. But I think the key thing is try it and see how you feel. Like I prefer the structure, as in there's parts of my day that are structured. So there are things that happen at certain times, and then like, okay, I've got 90 minutes free there. How do I feel? What do I want to do? What are like the priorities? And then like, what do I feel like I could have a really good crack at now? versus, well, I scheduled this really complex task and I'm shattered,
Yeah.
but I'd better do it anyway. The example I was going to mention, which is, I think was a previous version of Yusef. I don't think it's the current iteration. It's not the V10 that you're witnessing here. Maybe like V2, V3.
Oh, that far back.
What is the guy called? He has a program called Kabuki Movement Systems.
Chris Duffin.
Chris Duffin. So Chris Duffin has a program called Kabuki Movement Systems, and for ages, Yusef wanted to buy Kabuki Movement Systems.
Thanks, Tim
And so
Garrett.
what Yusef did was he would, so Tim Garrett said to you, you should buy Kabuki Movement Systems, I assume.
Yeah.
Right. So incoming information, task, something I might want to do something I might want to do someday. I know where I'll put it. I'll put it on my calendar. So you made an appointment for like one evening, and for what felt like years,
I think
once
it
a
was
month,
2 years probably.
once a month, because we have a shared calendar, I would get a notification saying Yusef rescheduled by Kabuki Movement Systems for some other arbitrary date in the future when Yusef had loads of time and loads of energy and loads of spare attention to go through the program. And one day I snapped and I went, man, for God's sake, just buy, like, the time that you're going through and rescheduling this event, just go and buy Kabuki Movement Systems. And the heartbreaking thing of it all is when he eventually went to buy Kabuki Movement Systems, it had been discontinued. And if that's not, I mean, I suppose like that would have happened in my system as well. It was just that I was seeing it happen in real time.
But you're
play
right.
out.
Like I had to keep making the decision to defer it. Whereas really what I should have done, and this is why I'm not a calendar purist anymore, because back then I was, and it was a real show.
I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
It was horrendous.
Witnessed the crumbling breakdown of it all.
Battlefield.
Now what I would do for something like that is I have a shopping list which I don't assign a date to, and so so unassigned dates are someday maybe tasks. Then what you would do every so often in your review is you see your lists side by side with your calendar. You then scroll through and you go, okay, now let's allocate this a time block, and that has to be a meaningful time block.
So my someday maybe filter is, if I don't think I'm going to do, I'll have a list of projects and list of stuff that I could do. And if I don't think like I'm probably going to do this in the next month, it goes on someday maybe. So I am always looking at this like semi-current lens, which I suppose is similar to like you're looking at like, what am I scheduling for the next month or the next couple of weeks? You're just going a step beyond. Like you're making the decision that I make on a daily basis in advance. I think we both probably make the same number of decisions.
When you account for it all, because of the relative failures of each system, makes you make the decisions to compensate, and so
because at the end of the day, if you haven't done something, you've got to make a decision. I don't, but I have to make that decision on the day
I see.
of what I'm going to do.
So actually, the answer to this question, I don't know if you would shake hands with me on this, that it's which problem would you like to have?
Yeah. Which I think ties back to try both.
Try both and see what you hate about both, or see what you love about both. And
yeah, see which problem it's the Mark Manson thing of like, choose the fucks you want to give. Like, because you've got to give some. So like pick the issues that you'd rather have. And also I think see which one allows you to get more done. Because it's a constant battle, isn't it? Of like, I can't remember where I saw this the other day. It's the gun to your head question again. If someone held a gun to your head, could you work harder than you do now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I'm just thinking a common thing that, and it's recommended by a lot of personal trainers now, is if you're struggling to motivate yourself to go to the gym, make it a non-negotiable appointment with yourself. Have you heard that?
Put it in your
calendar as an event.
As an event.
So at what point does it go from being a task in the someday maybe to an event, and why does that make it more likely that you'll do it?
In my case, do you mean?
Yeah, like why? When you hear that piece of advice, do you think, okay, I can see why that would work, or do you think that's bullshit?
So putting it on a calendar would mean that like it's happening at a certain time, rather than like it's on some. So if you like, the way that I would view my calendar is like what's going to happen.
So it's sacred. So okay, so you're saying that when I start moving things around, I am desecrating my calendar because I'm no longer treating it as this is stuff that will definitely happen.
It's just that it might not definitely happen. And I think the fact that things get moved means that it doesn't definitely happen. So like if I was like, if I'm like catching up with a friend this evening, and it got to like 8 p.m. and I hadn't gone, I wouldn't just like move it to tomorrow night. Like I'm going, or like it gets cancelled, in which case it might get rescheduled. But if I put in tonight, gym, it's an attempt at like formalizing that and treating it in the same way as something.
You're definitely
like, you're not
going to visit gym today.
Yeah, exactly. Like with your podiatry appointment tomorrow. Like
But
that's
okay,
something.
what if Jim doesn't want to see you?
Well, so I think this is the issue that people have, isn't it? It's just that Jim wants to see them, but they don't want to see Jim.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of the problem, isn't it? Wow.
But so yeah, I think because the other thing that I think is a shame. So this is so. Me, Chris, and Yusef were walking. We were going to see a comedy show, and we're walking into the comedy. We were walking into the comedy show, and
I've got no idea where this is going.
this isn't even that funny. It was Chris's. It was the way Chris said it to me. So we were walking downstairs, and Chris said something like, "In 2 weeks' time, Yusuf won't even remember this has happened because he'll look back at his calendar and it'll say he did nothing that day."
Okay.
So the thing I think is the shame. I think that was it was after the person was like, "Who's the booking name under?" and you didn't know which name you'd given them,
Right.
which is a whole other web of questions.
Yeah.
But it's a shame, I think. So like back to the start of the conversation, you said, "What have you been up to?" My instinctive reaction was to look at my calendar.
I see.
Like what are the events in my calendar?
Wow.
So it's like a
great callback to the start of the podcast here.
It's like a comedy sketch, loop it right back to the beginning.
But you're doing that. You're abusing calendars just as much as you see me abusing a calendar as a to-do list. Like it's not a calendar isn't a diary.
Why?
It's not a.
No, it's just a record of events.
But if you want
Past, present, and future.
If you want a sentimental record of events, like take some photos at the comedy.
I don't want a sentimental record. I want a record.
But when you're saying like it's sad that Chris said I wouldn't even remember that we went on the comedy, like it's sad if you're looking back and you go, oh yeah, look at my calendar, remember when we did that, as opposed to like, oh, there's a nice photo of us all together. Like that's much more hard.
So,
you can frame that. You can't frame an event on your calendar and put it on the. You can, but it would be a bit weird.
Not if it's like have a poo, go for a walk. Then it would be weird.
I suppose you do get people who. So Paul Black is a Glaswegian comedian who I am loving on Instagram at the moment, and he's got a sketch called "People Whose Entire Personality Is Going to Gigs," and
Right.
and it's like, you know, saying, "Oh, I saw this person," and "Oh, I met the boys backstage," and you do see people who save tickets for gigs and, you know, plaster them all over their wall. It was very like teenage thing that our generation did. I feel.
Yeah, and now tickets are just on your phone, aren't they?
Oh yeah, just a QR code with a COVID lateral flow.
But yeah, you know, you could attach that file to the calendar event.
And then you can go, oh, remember that?
No, I remember that. But yeah, I think the critical thing is like, do you enjoy the system and can you maintain it and does it work?
Yeah. So try it out, and obviously have a look at the productivity playlist on our channel. We've got loads of stuff from both perspectives on there. And
There are some people, one more thing. Just one more thing. There are some people who, so there's a mutual friend that we both have that, obviously we both have them, otherwise it wouldn't be a mutual friend. We have a mutual friend who, whenever we try and arrange something with this person, it's really difficult to do that with him. And I think it's because he just doesn't have a calendar at all. And I feel
like he's got neither. He's got neither a calendar or a list. He just has a thing that he's working on and just goes all in on it. Which again, like it solves a lot of problems and it creates.
It's very admirable. Yeah, it's very essentialism. But I think like we're both making the assumption here that people have a calendar, and I think probably most people do. But it might be like just a work calendar, for example.
Or like don't be half in. If you're going to use a calendar, like use it properly.
So I think one of the critical functions of a calendar is if I say to you, next Monday, I want to do blah, blah, blah at 10:30 a.m. You can say...
Well, I can't. I've got the hot seat Q&A, which we run live 3 times a week for all Propane business clients. So we can go through...
4 times a week now.
Oh, well, yeah, 4 now. Where we chat on the call, we go through feedback for your copy, advice for your software, your content, help optimize your challenge conversion.
10 times better.
It's amazing.
10 times better. But so that's interesting. I've just thought of an argument. So you have events for a month's time.
Yeah.
But nearer the time you have tasks.
Yes. So I
think you...
yeah.
So in the future, if you were to look in May's calendar, you would see what my calendar looks like probably.
Yes, and then as it gets closer to the time, it starts to become more solidified.
So I still do that process. I just do it on a way shorter time horizon and in a more fluid way. We've cracked it.
Oh my God. Okay.
That's the difference.
We've seen through the matrix now. So actually, it's the same process, but on different time horizons.
As long as I think what you used to do when someone said buy Kabuki movement systems, you would have put that on your calendar, and that I fundamentally disagree with that.
To be honest, me too.
Right.
I've seen it fail.
But so I think like that's really the main use of a calendar is that, isn't it? Like, when are you free? And this person that we'll both try and arrange, like going for dinner with him, and he'll say, oh, I'm free next Wednesday evening. And it'll get to next Tuesday and he'll go, oh, I'm in London. And both of us are like,
how long have you known you were in London? A month.
I was like, oh, it's this thing. And I cannot imagine living my life like that. Like the amount of mental RAM that is being taken up, just like holding these commitments and not like trying not to overlay them. So if you take anything from this podcast, it's use a bloody calendar to arrange future commitments. Whether it's like all of today and all of tomorrow, or like just over the next month or over the next year, the events you're going to, so that you can answer the question, are you free next Wednesday night? It'll help a ton if you're not doing it already.
It will, absolutely. That settles the great debate. If you have anything else that you would like us to debate to this level of depth,
then send us a voice message.
For heaven's sake.
Please.
And if anyone has Kabuki movement systems, please will you send it to me? Thank you.
Just put it in your calendar.
Ad infinitum. Bye-bye.
Bye.